Okay, we're just going to jump right into this. There's a ton of information here. It might be a little scattered at times, but I will do my best to organize as I go, as there's quite a bit to go through. If any of you have been following the recent events involving Michael Brown, James White, and Phil Johnson and crew, then you're acquainted with some of what I'm about to share. Pulpit and Pen just released this article a few days ago. Phil Johnson and Todd Friel say that Michael Brown is not orthodox and is dangerous. Why do they say that? They say that because Michael Brown is partners and associates with known heretics. He has given Benny Hinn a pass, Carl Lentz, just to name a couple. So they detail a lot of this, and here's a transcript from an interview with Phil Johnson that Todd Friel did on Too Wretched for Radio, I guess it is. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen to what it is they're talking about. And again, this is involving Michael Brown and his heretical associations. Let's listen for a second.
To me, it seems the trade-off is not worth it because he promotes these charismatic extremists and including some of the very worst heresies that he downplays. Now, if you asked him to give an account of, say, the doctrine of justification by faith, he clearly understands what Scripture teaches, and he is capable of giving an orthodox account of that doctrine. But he defends people who don't preach it and people who deny it, and so in the end, he sows so much confusion that my counsel to people is steer clear of him. I don't think he's a positive influence at all.
Steer clear of him. Phil doesn't think he's a positive influence at all, because though Michael Brown is capable of asserting many orthodox tenets, as Phil put it, he defends people that don't, right? Here's Randy Clark from the Toronto Blessing in the 90s, where people were crawling around barking like dogs. Rick Joyner of, I think it's Daystar Ministries or Morning Star Ministries. He's a Knight of Malta, amongst other things. Drunk in the Spirit, Heidi Baker. Ecumenist Lou Engle, calling for Catholics and Protestants to unite. Reinhard Bonnke over here officiated Benny Hinn's second wedding. And also claims to raise people from the dead. John Arnott is a self-proclaimed apostle, right? Their assessment is absolutely valid. What Michael Brown is in the thick of is utterly heretical, utterly heretical. All of these people are, I don't even know if apostate is the right word, because I don't think they fell away from anything. They've always been this. They have been false teachers and false prophets from the beginning. So here's Michael Brown, who does affirm many orthodox tenets right in the thick of this mess. Let's get a little bit more from here.
John Arnott, NAR guys, IR and This is, and it's huge, by the way. This isn't like a little fringe group.
Yeah.
This is like the kooky stuff that you see on the videos.
Yeah, and
he is right in the middle of it, it seems. He's appearing with all of these folks. It's not that he just endorsed Benny Hinn. He participates in conferences with these folks. So I don't think that he's like, well, I'm giving a pat, hey, I know these guys, they're good people. It seems to me Michael is these people.
Right, and if I can...
That's a very valid point, Todd. It's not just that he's associated with these people. He is right in the thick of it, and therefore he is these people. Just a couple months ago, Michael Brown, this is the One Thing conference put on by heretic Mike Bickle from IHOP in Kansas City. Here's Michael Brown again. With Michael Bickle and all of these people. And again, Todd Friel and Phil Johnson are absolutely correct. It's not just that he's associating with them. He is participating in conferences with them He is these people. Mike Bickle was part of the Kansas City Prophets, great friends with Bill Johnson of Bethel Church in Redding, California. Great friends with Lou Engle as well, whom we saw right over here from the call. Mike Bickle, Bill Johnson, Lou Engle are three very close friends. And here's Michael Brown partnering with them, right? He is right in the thick of it. And Friel is absolutely correct in his affirmation that Michael Brown, by virtue of this, is these people. Now, let's take a closer look, shall we? Who do we have right above Michael Brown? This is Francis Chan. Francis Chan, author of the acclaimed book Crazy Love, used to pastor a church in Simi Valley, California, and left that a few years back to pursue a career in conference Christianity, speaking everywhere, including the One Thing Conference with Mike Bickle. And no wonder, we just put a video out 2 days ago highlighting this. Francis Chan, on two separate occasions, affirmed his love for Mike Bickle. I love this guy. I love Mike Bickle. Francis Chan, good friends with the Passion Movement. Him and Louis Giglio have been partnering up for years together. Francis Chan, Carl Lentz of Hillsong Church in New York City, Louis Giglio, friends with the Pope, and John Piper. Well, let's get back to Francis Chan for a second. Here we have Passion 2017, last year. Francis Chan, Christine Kane, from Hillsong Church, Beth Moore, Louis Giglio, Kristen Stanfill, all of these famous Christian musicians, Chris Tomlin, David Crowder, Matt Redman, Hillsong United, and who's that? John Piper again. Francis Chan, affirming his love for Mike Bickle, is a good friend to the Passion Conference and to John Piper as well. Francis Chan, let's see here. This is the 2018 Passion schedule. And again, we have Louis Giglio. We have all of the usual suspects, Christine Kane, David Crowder, Levi Lusko, new fledgling heretic, great friend of Stephen Furtick and Carl Lentz from Hillsong Church. And who do we have here again? John Piper. Now, what I find curious about the statements made by both Tom and Phil are, a few years back, John Piper received some heat for inviting Rick Warren to the Desiring God conference. This was in 2010. So Phil Johnson, in response to that, wrote an article on the Warren connection. Now, he says of John Piper that he loves him, he's friends with him. What he says of Rick Warren here is, I can't think of anyone who would make a finer poster boy for the pragmatic, spiritually impoverished, gospel-deprived message of modern and postmodern evangelicalism than Rick Warren. He is shallow, pragmatic, and chameleonic. He is a spiritual changeling who will say whatever his audience wants to hear. He desperately wants to be liked by Muslims, evangelicals, and everyone in between. Absolutely correct assessment. Notice that he calls Rick Warren's message gospel-deprived. That is a false teacher. Now we skip a little bit further down in the article. How does this pertain to John Piper? And Phil Johnson's assessment is this: but Dr. Piper's friendship with Rick Warren doesn't instantly and automatically make Dr. Piper an enemy of the faith. People have already called for a boycott of his books, reprisals against those who were perceived as lukewarm in their response to Piper, and practically everything short of assassination. In their minds, those who balk at the cry for some kind of nuclear strike against Piper are guilty of utter apathy and inaction. That's a ridiculous point of view. He talks about how Piper mentions secondary separation here, which is an indication that Piper knew this was going to be a divisive invitation, and that's another reason why he's very sorry and disappointed. So he's very sorry and disappointed that John Piper would align himself with a gospel-deprived person like Rick Warren. But in his assessment of Michael Brown, Phil Johnson warns us to stay away from him.
Benny Hinn, he participates in conferences with these folks. So I don't think that he's like, well, I'm giving a pat, hey, I know these guys, they're good people. It seems to me Michael is these people.
Right, and if I can say this without...
Michael is these people, says Todd Friel, and Phil Johnson doesn't object. He says, right. Just before that, he warned us to stay away from people like Michael Brown. Already, we have a double standard set, don't we, Mr. Johnson? Now, perhaps he forgot that he wrote this article about Rick Warren, but here, a few days ago, he is pretty dogmatically asserting that Michael Brown is guilty, despite his affirmations of orthodox tenets of Christianity. He is guilty of the same heresy of his partners in ministry, which is in fact a correct assertion. I'm wondering why, though, Phil and Todd, the double standard. Again, Francis Chan, John Piper here at the Passion Conference. Let's look at some friends of the Passion Conference. This is from their website, Passion 2018, Friends of the Passion Conference. Levi Lusko, here he is, Through the Eyes of a Lion. Christine Kane, again, Hillsong Pastrix. John Piper. Beth Moore, there we go. Norman Geisler. More John Piper. Lisa Turkhurst. Who do we have down here? Matt Chandler and Christine Kane. Matt Chandler is a friend of the Passion Conference as well. Matt Chandler spoke there a couple years back, and Louis Giglio, the friend of the Pope, friend of he's another type of a Rick Warren. He'll befriend anybody who will have him. Here's Matt Chandler at the Passion Conference.
So I just want you guys to welcome, as we get ready to open the Word, our friend Matt Chandler, the Passion 2015 is coming down there.
I love you, brother. Love you, Mama. Well, it is a joy for me.
It's a joy for me. He extended his love there to, I think that was Matt Redman and Christy Nockels, who are, let's see if we got them up here. There you go. There's Christy Nockels and Matt Redman. It might have been Chris Tomlin. These guys look pretty similar, but nevertheless, they are both staples at the Passion Conference. Incidentally, they are staples elsewhere. They are staples in another set of conferences called Outcry, Hillsong United, Brian Houston's church, and I use the term loosely, Hillsong Church out of Australia. Jesus Culture from Bill Johnson's heretical Bethel Church in Redding, California. Kari Jobe, David Crowder, The Passion Band, Bethel Music, Lauren Daigle. Trip Lee. It's interesting. I think Todd Friel just did a little interview with him. Nick Hall. Nick Hall's the man that organized the Fill the Mall event in Washington, D.C. in 2016, in which Pope Francis himself gave the opening address via satellite or video recorded message. There's Louis Giglio, Passion 2013, Jesus Culture. Here's the Southern Baptist Convention, home to Al Mohler and David Platt. Who did they invite to speak in 2014? None other than Francis Chan and Rick Warren. According to Todd Friel, if you're speaking at conferences together, you are those people. And guess what, Todd? I agree with you. Here we have the, this is another One Thing event with Reinhard Bonnke. That's who's speaking with Dr. Michael Brown. You got Francis Chan, Mike Bickle, Misty Edwards. Let's see. Here we got Francis Chan and Matt Chandler speaking together. at the Right Now conference in Dallas. They're good friends too. What do we have here? The Send conference with Francis Chan and Mark Dever. There they are. You're going to see David Platt speaking at this same conference as well. And there's Phil Wickham. He sings at the Jesus Culture conferences frequently. Again, all of them are partners in ministry. Todd Friel, Phil Johnson, you're both right, my friends. You're both right. There's Mark Dever and Francis Chan. Oh, who's that? Carl Lentz, the heretic, with John Piper. There they are, hanging out again. And no wonder they speak at the Passion conferences frequently together. There's Carl Lentz with Joel Osteen. How do you like that? Joel Osteen and Carl Lentz, John Piper and Carl Lentz. Zero discernment, zero discretion. Look at those smiles. There's Louis Giglio greeting Pope Francis with a kiss. This is the leader of the Passion Conference, the leader of Passion City Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and John Piper's friend and colleague, Francis Chan's friend and colleague, Matt Chandler's friend and colleague, greeting who Charles Spurgeon would call the Antichrist, or at the very least, an Antichrist. And there's Shelley Giglio right behind him. This is who Matt Chandler, Francis Chan, and John Piper are partners in ministry with. Well, if that weren't enough, the Sing Conference coming up this year, we got Tim Keller, Ravi Zacharias, John Piper, and John MacArthur speaking together. Well, isn't that interesting? We'll get to that in a minute. Christine Kane, part of the Passion Conference, with Lecrae, Hillsong United, Elevation Worship out of Stephen Furtick's church. There's Stephen Furtick. There's the Passion Band from Passion City Church with Kristen I think his name's Kristen Stanfill. Here's the One Thing Conference from 2013. This is nothing new. Francis Chan and Mike Bickle. Mike Bickle, the heretic. There they are. Jesus Culture. Matt Redman, part of the Passion Conference that Matt Chandler speaks at. There they are. Misty Edwards, Banning Leibisher. All of these people are interconnected intimately. Here's Outcry 2016, Hillsong Worship from Brian Houston's church, Jesus Culture from Bethel Church in Redding, California, Kari Jobe from the Passion Conference, Passion Band with Kristen Stanfill, Elevation Worship from Stephen Furtick's church, with Brian Houston, the man that says Muslims and Christians serve the same God. Well, here's Passion 2017. You got Louis Giglio, the Passion Band with Kristen Stanfill. There's Chris Tomlin, Matt Redman, Beth Moore, Christine Kane, David Crowder. And who do we have here again? None other than John Piper and Hillsong United. John Piper at Passion 2015 with Carl Lentz and Francis Chan. Again, remember, Francis Chan and Michael Brown speak at the exact same conference together. These men are all connected. If Michael Brown is guilty, so is Francis Chan. Who do we have here? Louis Giglio, the Pope Kisser, with his friends Matt Redman and Chris Tomlin, David Crowder, Kristen Stanfill, Kari Jobe, Ravi Zacharias, the man who has no official position on Catholicism. That's brilliant. Hillsong United, Christine Kane, self-proclaimed pastrix, and there's John Piper again. John Piper with the Passion Conference. These are his friends. There's David Platt at the same Send conference that we saw Francis Chan and Mark Dever speaking at together. Again, this was just last year, folks. David Platt, Mark Dever hanging out there. There you got Stephen Furtick, Kim Walker-Smith from Passion Conference at T.D. Jakes Conference right here. Endure the Race. Yeah. So there's just a few of the connections in picture form. Now let's get back to where we were. Here's the Passion Conference. We got Jesus Culture, Kim Walker-Smith. John Piper spoke at this conference. This is the music that comes out of Bill Johnson's heretical Bethel Church in Redding, California. These are the same people. These are the same people. Friends of Passion, Matt Chandler and John Piper. Real quick, let's just listen to a little more of Phil and Todd so we can get a a more clear picture of where we're supposed to go.
Judging his motives, which is hard to do, because what I'm going to say is he's been deceptive about it. Whether it's deliberately deceptive or if he himself is self-deceived, I don't know. But a lot of his critics have challenged him on his advocacy of these NAR leaders and certain ideas associated with the NAR movement and all of that. And his claim was he didn't have a clue even what that was. He wasn't aware of the NAR, didn't think it was a big thing to worry about. He's not involved in it, and yet he is up to his nostrils in it.
Yeah, he's right next to Randy Clark. All of these are all. Look, if I do a conference, I know who's in the green room. I know what's going on out there. I know what these folks are about. Did you get an invite to the Light the Fire Again conference?
No, and they wouldn't.
No, of course not. Because when you do things like this, it's because you group them together because they're in the same vein. Shepherd's Conference, you're probably not going to see Ken Copeland there.
Right.
And you're not going to see John MacArthur invited to a Ken Copeland shebang because they're grouped together.
Yeah, no probable about it. It's just that's not going to happen. And
oh, it's funny, isn't it, Todd? Well, your hypocrisy is tragic. So who won't you find together with John MacArthur? Interesting, these points that you've made, Todd and Phil, because we have standing right next to John MacArthur at the Together for the Gospel Conference coming up in just 3 months, folks. This is this year's schedule, April of 2018. You have none other than John Piper, friend of Passion Conference, Francis Chan, Rick Warren, etc. You have David Platt. You know who David Platt's friends with? Let's go to his website. The first thing you're going to see on the website, David Platt and Francis Chan. How about that? Francis Chan and David Platt, that's the first thing you see on the website, is him, just a lot of him and Francis Chan. Interesting. Matt Chandler, the guy who counts it a joy to be amongst heretics at the Passion Conference.
Can't hear you. There's too many. It's muddled.
It's muddled. Let's be funny.
Okay. I only have 50 minutes, so.
A wannabe stand-up comic over here. Brilliant, Matt. So that's who you're going to find. You got Al Mohler and Mark Dever here. Mark Dever's good friends with Russell Moore, who likes to help build mosques. Al Mohler took a trip to Rick Warren's Saddleback Church in 2013. And again, don't forget the picture I just showed you. These men right here are part of the Southern Baptist Convention that invited both Rick Warren and Francis Chan just a couple of years ago to speak at a pastor's conference. So here's John MacArthur side by side with John Piper. Yes, this John Piper, who, like Michael Brown, is in the thick of this type of heresy. So if I'm to take you seriously, Phil and Todd, you have some explaining to do. If Michael Brown is guilty, and he is, then John Piper equally so. And why, pray tell, is he speaking with John MacArthur not just once, but twice this year? Remember the Sing Conference I just showed you, 2018, the Getty Music Worship Conference with Keith and Kristen Getty, I think it is. You've got John Piper and Ravi Zacharias both speaking at that conference. This year, with John MacArthur. Now, according to Todd Friel, if I speak at a conference, I know who's speaking in my midst. I mean, I know who's in the green room. You know who's in the green room? You know what they're all about? Why doesn't John MacArthur know what they're all about? Here he is with Matt Chandler and David Platt, friend to Francis Chan, friend to all of this heresy. Christine Caine, Levi Lusko, the list goes on. The same people at the same conferences. Here's Al Mohler again at the Shepherd's Conference. And Mark Dever at the same Shepherd's Conference. And yes, these are men that happily affirm the silliness of people like Russell Moore and Rick Warren and Francis Chan. Again, just in case you forgot, let me go back to this slideshow real quick. There's David Platt speaking at the Send Conference, Ravi Zacharias, Christine Caine, John Piper. All of these people intimately familiar with the same exact network of people that Michael Brown himself is being lambasted for hanging out with, and rightfully so. John Piper, Francis Chan, Louis Giglio, the Pope Kisser, Carl Lentz, the heretic from Hillsong Church, John Piper, Matt Redman, Beth Moore, the heretic, Christine, the heretic. I'm not using the term heretic lightly. These people embrace every wind of folly you can imagine. Hillsong United, David Crowder. They sing with Jesus Culture from Bethel Church in Redding, California. Do you guys see this? You see this? Mike Bickle, affirmed false prophet, great friends with Francis Chan, who speaks at the Jesus Culture Conference, and Matt Redman, an intimate part of the Passion Conference at which Matt Chandler and John Piper both speak. Wow. And Lecrae. Everybody thought this guy was sound too. You had Paul Washer affirming him, never repudiated that. You have Paul Washer affirming John Piper, never repudiated that. The implications of this extend much further than John MacArthur, but since he seems to be the queen bee of sorts, let's take it right to the source. Why is John MacArthur speaking with John Piper and Ravi Zacharias and Tim Keller? According to Phil Johnson and Todd Friel, both, he is these people. I'm using your words, Todd. I'm using your words, Phil. Louis Giglio and the Pope, Carl Lentz and Joel Osteen, Carl Lentz and John Piper, Francis Chan and Mark Dever. Remember Mark Dever that was invited to the Shepherds Conference? Here's Mark Dever last year speaking with Phil Wickham and Francis Chan. Phil Wickham is all over the place, at a Jesus Culture Conference, at a Hillsong Conference, stick him anywhere, pop culture, Christianity. Francis Chan loves Mike Bickle. There's Mark Dever. So if Michael Brown is in the thick of it, how is Mark Dever not in the thick of it, gentlemen? You have some explaining to do. If Francis Chan is embracing Mike Bickle, how is Matt Chandler not right in the thick of it? Well, these guys are friends. They're part of the same Passion Conference. But you know that. Wow. Rick Warren and Francis Chan at the Southern Baptist Convention Pastors Conference just 4 short years ago with James McDonald as well. Al Mohler was there. David Platt was there. Did either of them object? Nope. Did either of them leave the Southern Baptist Convention? Nope. Sure didn't. Jesus Culture, Louis Giglio. So this is what we have on our hands, folks, is a network, an interconnected network of folly and double standards that it just amazes me that what is being said is actually being said.
Right. And you're not going to see John MacArthur invited to a Ken Copeland shebang because they're grouped together.
Yeah, no probable about it. It's just that's not going to happen. And
no probable about it. Now let's get a little bit more from Phil Johnson here.
I've heard him do debates alongside and against, and he can sort of hold his own in a
Speaking of Michael
context
Brown
like that. But I've tried interacting with him and find him not to be receptive to. He's not a good listener, let's say. He likes to talk, not to listen. And he did me a great favor in the end by blocking me from his Twitter and Facebook accounts. So by necessity, I've kind of tuned him out. And it's made my life much easier.
He did you a great favor by blocking you from his Twitter and Facebook accounts. He likes to talk, but he doesn't like to listen. Well, isn't this interesting? Look who blocked me from his Twitter account. Phil Johnson. When I tried to talk to Phil about this, Phil took the same approach that Michael Brown took. When I tried to talk to Phil on Facebook about this, with a slew of pictures including John Piper, Louis Giglio, Francis Chan, and Beth Moore on stage doing Lectio Divina, Matt Chandler here tweeting to Beth Moore, dang Beth Moore, like it's his sister, right? And I'm asking him, this initially was directed to somebody else. And I'm highlighting these associations, this problem with joining hands in fellowship at a conference, the very same problem Todd Friel just acknowledged in his own words. I said, look at what's happening. Mark Dever, and I said, who's supporting this? Phil Johnson, John MacArthur, Grace Community Church. I said, MacArthur will be speaking with all of them in a few short months. I then posted a couple of more pictures. Here's Al Mohler and Rick Warren. Let's see if I can, this picture will pull up, only because it's very small. You've got Al Mohler, who was invited to the Shepherds Conference, right here with Rick Warren. You got John Piper with Carl Lentz. You got Mark Dever with Russell Moore. You have Rick Warren with Russell Moore and N.T. Wright, all three of whom are at the Vatican. Down here, it's very hard to see. You have, oh, hold on, maybe this is coming up. It's a little blurry, but there's Al Mohler and Rick Warren speaking at another conference together. Okay, finally cleared up. David Platt with Rick Warren and Russell Moore. Again, this is the same David Platt standing side by side with John MacArthur. Here's Al Mohler with Rick Warren. Here's Louis Giglio with the Pope. Here's Louis Giglio talking to Matt Chandler, the same Matt Chandler that is speaking with John MacArthur in 3 months, ladies and gentlemen. The same John Piper here with Carl Lentz that is speaking with John MacArthur in 3 months, ladies and gentlemen. This Russell Moore, who's hanging out with Rick Warren and N.T. Wright at the Vatican, who is great friends with Mark Dever, the same Mark Dever that is invited to the Shepherds Conference with John MacArthur, ladies and gentlemen. I think we have a problem. Now, what was Phil Johnson's response to all this? Well, he said of Michael Brown, he likes to talk, but he doesn't like to listen. Phil Johnson's response right here, hey, he's a New Yorker with 0 Facebook friends. It's an automatic not guilty by reason of insanity verdict. Cut him some slack. So you have Phil Johnson attempting to bully me by saying I have 0 Facebook friends and not addressing the very thing that he's now lambasting Michael Brown for. If this is not the most egregious form of hypocrisy, I don't know what is. It is disgusting, even by worldly standards. Phil Johnson, you coward and you hypocrite. J.D. Hall, Pulpit and Pen, you cowards and you hypocrites. Guess what, people? I got a phone call with J.D. Hall, a couple of them. And I'll be happy to release J.D. Hall saying that he doesn't believe in multiple degrees of separation. He believes in 1 degree of separation, not 27. I've got an hour-long conversation with Justin Peters where I warned him about these exact same things, and he affirmed to me he wouldn't dare speak a foul word about John MacArthur. He doesn't believe John Piper is lost. Yes, Justin Peters has some explaining to do as well, and that phone call will be released shortly. But there's Phil Johnson's godly response. He's a New Yorker with 0 Facebook friends. It's an automatic, not guilty by reason of insanity. Well, Phil, if I'm insane, then so are you, my friend. I'm only making the point that you and Todd just made. When I asked him to address the facts, and I addressed the fact that he was bullying me, he says, by bullying someone you can't contend with, that's rich, like I came on your Facebook page and tried to provoke conflict with you. This wasn't Phil Johnson's Facebook page either. I believe this was posted on Pulpit and Pen's page. So I didn't go to Phil Johnson's page to provoke this. Did I block you on Twitter after that flood of sophomoric tweets aimed at me from your account? Just like Michael Brown. Precisely how have I bullied you? I might laugh from time to time at your foolish irrationalities or mock your pathologically pugnacious comments, but in no way have I bullied you. I've mostly just ignored you and will continue to do so. Enjoy yourself, and if you ever want to have a real conversation with me as opposed to a braggadocious taunt about debating with you on camera, you know exactly how to find me. What is Phil Johnson referencing there? I have offered. I said I have and continue to offer to debate the issue with you publicly in front of a camera. Put your money where your mouth is. But Phil Johnson, like Michael Brown, is eager to talk and not eager to listen. He then sent me the article on the Piper-Warren connection, which I was acquainted with prior to. But let's go back to Phil and Todd.
And that's my advice to other people. Tune him out, because whatever he may say that's right is mixed with so much confusion that the bottom line of the whole mess is he will leave you in a state of gross confusion, and it's not helpful at all.
Do you believe that Michael is orthodox in all regards?
No, I wouldn't call him orthodox. He's definitely sub-orthodox. People sometimes...
That's good enough. Now, he would recommend tuning Michael out. The same Michael that blocked Phil, and Phil found, by implication there, a cowardly move, but ultimately a service to him. It would be just best to block him out. Well, if that's the case, Phil, maybe we should block you out, because your friend John MacArthur, your partner John MacArthur, and not just partner. Phil Johnson speaks at the Shepherd's Conference as well. Obviously, he's the executive director of Grace to You, pulls in over $230,000 a year. Check out the IRS 990 forms if you'd like to see that. Utterly pales in comparison to John MacArthur's $400,000 alone from Grace to You. That is not including his pastor's salary. That is not including his housing allowance. That is not including his book royalties. All told, conservatively estimating, John MacArthur pulls in approximately $1 million per year, but that's another subject. Al Mohler with Rick Warren, Al Mohler with Francis Chan, Mark Dever with Russell Moore, and we're going to critique Michael Brown for his questionable associations. David Platt, the friend of Francis Chan. Matt Chandler, the proponent of the Passion Conference that endorses Hillsong United and Jesus culture. Jesus culture that plays worship music at the same conferences that Michael Brown is speaking at. Are you kidding me right now? All of these men are foolish hypocrites until any of them step down, remove themselves from this platform, and repudiate these endorsements. All of them are guilty by the same association, which isn't an association, it's guilt by approval. It is a 2 John 11, guilt by approval. It is an Amos 3:3, guilt by approval. It is guilt by refusal to submit to Romans 16:17. It is a refusal to submit to 1 Corinthians 5:11. All of these men are hypocrites. Paul Washer, that goes for you too. You have unabashedly endorsed John Piper for decades, and not once have you repudiated that endorsement, despite his continued folly. You have nothing to say about this? You have nothing to say about this? You have nothing to say about John MacArthur standing idly by, silent, while this folly takes place in his midst? But right out of the mouth, right out of the horse's mouth, we have the critique.
NAR has infiltrated charismatics. This is, and it's huge, by the way. This isn't like a little fringe group.
Yeah.
This is like the kooky stuff that you see on the videos.
Yeah, and
he is right in the middle of it, it seems. He's appearing with all of these folks. It's not that he just endorsed Benny Hinn. He participates in conferences with these folks. So I don't think that he's like, well, I'm giving a pat, hey, I know these guys, they're good people. It seems to me Michael is these people. Right,
and if I can say this without judging his motives, which is hard to do, because what I'm going to say is he's been deceptive about it.
People.
Well,
if that's true, Todd Friel, and I agree with you that it is, John MacArthur is these people. Because John Piper is these people. If John Piper is these people, right? And Francis Chan is these people, we got a real problem on our hands, don't we, fellas? Francis Chan is the same people as Michael Brown and Mike Bickle. Francis Chan is these people. And according to Todd Friel's own words, John Piper is right in the thick of it with Beth Moore and Louis Giglio and all of the Passion and Hillsong and Jesus culture embracing fools that you see in front of you, false teachers, ignorant charlatan profiteers. John Piper is these people. John Piper is these people. And Matt Chandler is these people. Matt Chandler counts it a joy. Matt Chandler, a friend of the Passion Conference. Well, if that's the case, John MacArthur is these people. There is more to come, folks. Much more to come, but we're going to leave it at that for now. Todd Friel and Phil Johnson, you have both been exposed by your own words, you hypocrite. You hypocrites. Let's make that plural. The folly is, it's insane. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Now, will they acknowledge it? Will they repent? Or have their commitments become so deep that it's impossible to dig their way out? Public relations are tough. We've got conferences to maintain. We've got money to be made. You know how much money the Together for the Gospel conference makes? Gosh, I wonder if we can find it real quick. I wonder what the registration fee on this bad boy is. Pricing and registration. There you go. Look at that. $249 per person. Isn't that brilliant? Through February 28th. After that, $329 per person. If you're a student, $100. These guys make a whole lot of money doing this. And John MacArthur, the heretic watchdog himself, standing side by side with John Piper, the promoter of the Passion Conference, and Francis Chan and Louis Giglio, and David Platt, the promoter of Francis Chan and Louis Giglio, and Matt Chandler, the promoter of Francis Chan and Louis Giglio, Mark Dever, Al Mohler. I'm only going to be redundant at this point, but gentlemen, Pulpit and Pen has been exposed for their hypocrisy. J.D. Hall refused to acknowledge this, and I'm happy to release that phone call anytime. Phil Johnson refused to acknowledge this. When I tried to talk to him, he called me somebody with no friends on Facebook who is guilty by reason of, not guilty by reason of insanity. That's the sort of childish games Phil Johnson resorted to, and then blocked me in a move of consummate hypocrisy and cowardice, just like his now foe, Michael Brown. Oh, Phil, you hypocrite, you. Ladies and gentlemen, there is much more to come. But for now, I want you to dwell on the fact that Jesus Culture and Bethel Church in Redding, California is ultimately being softly endorsed by none other than John MacArthur himself, according to Todd Friel and Phil Johnson. That's their argument. So until or unless John MacArthur pulls out from Together for the Gospel, until or unless he disinvites Al Mohler and Mark Dever, or calls them to publicly repudiate their known endorsements and partners in ministry, Russell Moore, Rick Warren, Francis Chan is connected to all of these guys. Now, we haven't even touched on Thabiti and Kevin DeYoung and C.J. Mahaney over here. There's much more to be said, but for now, until or unless John MacArthur repudiates any and all endorsements of Together for the Gospel, he is guilty by virtue of the same standard Michael Brown is guilty of. According to Todd and Phil, you may affirm many truths, but at the end of the day, you only cause confusion at the best by partnering with men who embrace folly. So the double standard has been outed in their own words, and there is more to come. Get ready.